The fucking war is fucking here. The battle lines have been drawn. People are wanting to fuck with people's rights in this bitch. And I don't like that. I really don't fucking like that. So that's why we have our fucking dark, ambient Viking horn 2. We're going to war. And I don't want to say these people are the enemy, but god damn. The Supreme Court has voted to strike down the landmark Roe v. Wade decision according to an initial draft majority opinion written by Justice Samuel Alito, circulated inside the court and obtained by Politico. The draft opinion is a full-throated, unflinching repudiation of the 1973 decision which guaranteed federal constitutional protections of abortion rights, and a subsequent 1992 decision, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that largely maintained the right. Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. We hold that Roe and Casey must be overruled, he writes in the document, labeled as the opinion of the court. It's time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. We've actually got it here too. If I actually have time one of these days, maybe we will go through and read these 98 pages, but I am not sitting down to read 98 pages right this second. Well, I didn't want to point at specifically the faces of random people. I'm really more mad about the politicians themselves that are writing this. Obviously, they're the ones that are trying to appeal to this type of person in the first place. It's... Okay, hold on. Here we go. We'll just do epic Viking and Nordic music. All right. That's, I mean, I'm not even trying to be like level-headed in that regard, that I'm like trying to feel bad for these people, but there are a lot of people who are just victims of misinformation or victims of being like brainwashed by religion to where they think that this is something that's like a very important issue, when in reality it's, I mean, the way that I feel about abortions is that if you don't like them, you're not no one's forcing you to have one. Like, there's totally room in a world where there's people who don't have a desire to do something, and then people who, you know, have to do it for whatever reason. People who have abortions aren't doing it because it's fun or because they want to. No, it's normally a very hard decision. And now you're just creating a world in which there are more children being born into families that either A, don't want them, or B, have no way or no means to actually take care of them. And so that's kind of where we sit here, is that yes, their goal of less abortions might happen if this were to go through. That's what we need to get to in a second, is that they are being a little bit clickbaity about it, but not in the way that you would think. It's not happening today, but this is the start of putting the train on the tracks. This is the wake-up call. This is the time where we have to decide, do we hold the non-elected officials responsible? And we'll see. We might be able to get into a little bit of shenanigans here, because good things can happen when you decide to mildly harass politicians sometimes. So I'm sure there's already some kind of movement on this, and we might just have to hop on that. But I know I myself personally will definitely be writing some letters and leaving some voicemails for these people, because this is not something that should happen. I don't think that this is right by any means. Yes, you're correct 100%, Annie Rules. Right now, I didn't think that this day was gonna come. To be honest, I've always been the person who's scared that this stuff is going to happen, because if you hear how Republicans talk about this type of stuff, this is how they've been talking for a long time, that they're going to take over the Supreme Court. And once they take over the Supreme Court, what's the first thing that's gone? They want Roe v. Wade gone. And that's kind of, what we're looking at here. And that doesn't mean that we don't have a chance to stop it still. There still is a very good chance that, we got them to change the fucking Sonic movie. Let's get them to change real life for once. I'm sick of them always winning when in fact they're actually in the minority for the majority of people in the world. As soon as Ginsburg died, yep. I mean, that's what happened. We lost some of our very respected, very wise justices that we've had for many, many years. Whereas I would say in general, the problem is that our Supreme Court is too powerful for a position that's not actually elected. And for something to not be elected to be indefinitely until you either choose to retire or die, you get stuck to where the Supreme Court is in a different fucking decade than the rest of the world, because it's not someone we're actively saying that we want to be in control of any policies or any laws that are over us. So essentially, as we're reading this draft here, Roe was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. They're trying to act like this is something. We do need age limits. I just strongly agree that someone who's not going to be able to see the effects of the laws that they're writing in their lifetime should not be responsible for writing laws. They flipped the Supreme Court. We haven't had a red-ruled Supreme Court in a very long time. Things are about to get scary before they get... Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that comes down to, I don't know who remembers this whole situation, because this is a minute ago. This is Obama. But when at the very end of Obama's his second term, he was supposed to elect a new Supreme Court Court nominee, an appointee for, taking over for was it Anthony Scalia that had passed, I think. And there was a whole debate about it to where they said, well, the next president's already been chosen, so we should save that for the next president. But when the exact same thing happened during the Trump's presidency, they hurried up and they pushed through that nominee, and that just absolutely has pushed them where they needed to be. And let's see. I wanted to check this one out. It does seem like it's more recent, and they're talking about what the responsibility of Congress should be to put protections in place.
Minnesota joins us now. She sits on the Judiciary Committee. She's absorbing this news just as we all are. Senator Klobuchar, thank you for being with us tonight. Let me just get your reaction to this news again. The headline tonight in Politico: Supreme Court has voted to overturn abortion rights. Draft opinion shows.
Now, everyone...
They're just going to show the same article that I just showed, but it's just the cover.
I don't know what the final opinion will be, but I will say that I have predicted this for a long time based on the court arguments and based on the hearings for these justices. I asked Amy Coney Barrett if she thought Roe v. Wade was super precedent. She did not think that it was. And yet, I believe the American people are with us. So I'd like to focus a bit here on what's going to happen if they do issue this opinion, when all signs point to that they will. Not just this leak, what they have said in the past. If this is...
And so to get more into that before we get back into the video, but that's it. This is just a leak of a vote that basically the entire all Republican majority got together and agreed that they were going to pass this through because they have the numbers to get it through. So they're making a commitment. They're definitely making a commitment to making this happen, and they know they have the numbers to do it. By the way, hi Pooch, I just saw that you're in here. How are you doing tonight? I'm like going off a little bit. And Canada does look better every day. That's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm not saying it has to be Canada in particular. I'm definitely considering long-term not being in the United States. Oh, and Pooch, I'm doing a lot better. I'm at least not feeling sick anymore, so that's good. But then I had to obviously wake up, or not wake up. The funny story is I actually was on the phone with my brother, and he just casually dropped a, hey, Roe v. Wade's getting overturned right now. So, that's funny thing too is I think maybe he is changing a little bit now as he's getting a little bit older. But my brother like always has been a little conservative. This is just one of those issues that he just doesn't understand why people make a big deal out of it. I think he, I don't know. I think he voted for Trump originally, but ended up regretting it. I don't know what that means. I don't think he voted last election. I think he might be over it for a little while. But so this is all just essentially a commitment to them eventually passing this, which very likely means that they will just pass it. And so ultimately, like that's something that's important to me about like where I live is that in Colorado, we already passed something. We've already passed protections that if for some reason Roe v. Wade were taken away, that we would still have those protections under our state constitution. So that's what's going to happen. Places like California, places, at least most blue states are probably going to put ratifications in place to make it to where it's possible. And so that's going to leave most red states, or at least the very red states, Texas, obviously Texas. You're going to talk about Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, all the red states. You have states like Georgia that kind of flipped. You have swing states, and swing states is going to be something that's going to be very vital and very interesting to see what happens with that, because you could actually see that to where that actually changes based on which way the state leans. Oh, I didn't know you were from Texas, Pooch. That's where I'm originally from, Texas. But that's where most of my family is still, is like North Texas. But that's something that's going to end up being a kind of that open invitation to my friends that I know that are in those areas, is that I will help and accommodate if this is something that needs to happen. I mean, I do think I have known people, honestly, that have probably overdone it and get too dependent on things like abortion, and that's not great. But at the end of the day, there's a lot more people who are not being irresponsible and not being dangerous with something like that. It's something that is a last case, worst case scenario, a last resort. And as much as there is some sadness that goes into that, that's not something that is taken lightly even by the people who typically do get abortions. It's not a super happy thing when that happens. Trust me, I know people, it's not necessarily a happy thing. But we don't want to keep on creating the problem of just more people in pain and more people who are born into families who aren't there or prepared to take care of them. We have so many people who are in the foster system right now. And a lot of times those situations aren't good for people. So That's why I don't take this lightly when people try to come in here and act like they're going to remove the whole choice from half. I mean, we're looking at probably half of Americans. And it's not something that's targeting all Americans either. It's something that's targeting women. It's obviously easy for a Supreme Court filled with mostly men to sit and make these decisions when you can probably spin something out to make it seem like that's a close issue. But when you take that issue up with most women, that's not something that women want to see happen. It's something that's it's taking away from women. And that's something that already happens far too often. Oh, exactly. And then you have a whole scenario, especially with trans people in pregnancy, that the way that some state governments view trans people is not human. So you imagine if a trans person needed, especially women in lower class situations. Oh, exactly. And it doesn't stop abortions. Then you're just going to create a situation to where people are finding creative homemade ways to give themselves abortions. And that's going to be 10 times more unsafe. That's something that causes way more problems when people are having to go through home abortions. You know, you hear the term wire hanger. That's something that's real, and that's something that people resort to. And obviously, I'm all for making things that are inevitable safer for people. That's the same way I support all decriminalization of all drugs, because I don't think locking people up and then creating someone who could be just a a petty crime like that that's not really affecting many people can then be arrested and then put in and learn. Exactly. That's really what it comes down to. They really would rather see trans people die than give healthcare to us. It's yeah. There's a lot of places that are trying to refuse medical assistance to anyone who identifies as trans, and that creates people who have to be scared or shameful of who they are. Trust me, I've been in that position for a long time. I mean, for me to even get to the point to where now I identify as non-binary, and I'm looking into that process of like I want to go that trans femme route at some point. I do want to take hormones and begin that transition. I know that like there are some places that you like cannot do that, or even if you technically can, it's not something that they're going to make it easy for you to be anything else. Hey, at the end of the day, sometimes it takes getting angry to actually make changes happen at all. And legal drop-offs. It's really sad, but within 72 hours of childbirth, one can abandon their child at a hospital, police department, fire station. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is like, imagine right now, especially with the foster system. Trust me, I'm from Texas, so I know how the foster system is, especially in certain areas. You're then just going to multiply the amount of kids that are in that system, which is going to overwhelm the system that they have in place. We're going to look at a very dangerous situation coming up, because just because abortions go down doesn't mean that more people want to adopt. That's been the issue. That's been an issue for a long time, is when people say you should put your child up for adoption, Yeah, as I'm saying, it's already so overwhelmed at this point. I already know many people who've fallen through the cracks. Exactly. And adoption is a hard and expensive process. So then it just creates this situation to where it's a lottery. What kid gets a home and what kid sits in foster until they are fucked up? I mean, honestly, how would you feel if you were a 17-year-old in a foster home and they're like, hey, hopefully you get adopted this year. If not, we just let you out on the street. We already have an immense issue with that in our country, and
Is issued over
here we
20
are.
states. There's a trigger where abortion will automatically be banned. So it's no longer going to be a decision between a woman and her doctor. Basically, I guess Ted Cruz has made this decision for people.
See, isn't that funny too? That's how like America works for some reason. So you look at this map, that looks like more than half of the country is losing access. But at the end of the day, there are way more. Ugh. Just because you have places like New York and California who are in that grayed out area, the actual population difference, there's probably, the yellow is probably under half of the country. Hopefully. I have to see how that number actually works out, but just having California and New York in there is putting a lot of people on that. But I mean, that's generally how our whole country works, is that you have all these little blue dots all over everywhere, and then all the rest of it is red. So when you look at it on a map, it looks like 90% of our country is red and 10% of it is blue. But all the blue areas are so highly densely populated because they actually are places people want to be. There's like more actual left-leaning people. I don't want to say Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. I've voted for a Democrat before out of the lesser of two evils, but if I had my choice, I would never vote for our current Democratic Party. Yes, that's gerrymandering. I was telling my brother that earlier, is that in order for a Democrat to win, typically, they have to overwhelmingly win. It can't just be something where they win by a little bit. They're winning by a considerable margin, because the way that our whole electoral college system works is that it gives land power over people. So you could have a district with like 10 people, and that might have the same weight of vote in the election as someplace in LA that has 2 million people living in it. It's completely hogwash.
The second thing that we're going to see happen is that you're going to...
Oh, and before we get back, yes, you are true. We never should have had a two-party system. I get very jealous of that because I see that most countries actually have at least 3 or 4 or 5 parties. They have a true leftist party, and then you have like and then it's sliding. In America, we really just have a conservative party and a slightly less conservative party. But both of our major political parties are conservative.
To have individual states considering laws banning it, and meanwhile, in Washington, it's on us now to try to codify Roe v. Wade into law. And as you know, we have 2 Republican senators who are with us when it comes to choice. But the question is, with the filibuster in place, which I firmly believe we should reverse, could we ever get to 60? So this is what we're dealing with right now. And I cannot overemphasize what a change this is, what a disregard to precedent. If this is true, yes, we can be outraged, but we also have to plan. We are going into election year. We are going into the fall, where women's rights are going to be on the ballot. And so if nothing can get done in Washington because of Republican obstructionism, then the American people and women are going to have to vote, and people who believe in choice are going to have to vote like they never voted before, because that's the only way we can change this up, or we're going to have a patchwork of laws across the country.
Senator, as you know, one of the things that is most determinative of a woman's economic freedom and self-determination.
But I mean, that is, like she said, that's the real test. That's when we're going to see things get interesting, is that after this, I guess, goes through in June, we'll then see in November all the red states passing their death penalties for abortions and all that fucking bullshit that they're trying to play.
Is her ability to make her own decisions about when and if she has kids. If that becomes the government's decision, if that is no longer a decision that women are allowed to make for themselves, that fundamentally changes the economic and life and cultural prospects for every woman in the country. I wonder if that stark truth about what this does to the future of American womanhood and the future of the American family, the future of who we are as a culture, might be enough to scare Republicans in Washington off an effort to do a nationwide ban. I mean, as you say, those trigger laws don't require any action. They'll just go into effect in more than 20 states. But we have reporting in the Washington Post today that they want a nationwide 6-week flat ban. Do you think that they might be the dog that catches the car in that case? They may be too scared to actually do something that radical, or do you think they'd just go for it?
Well, I mean, obviously, they are not going to be able to pass something like this in the Senate right now because Democrats have the slim 50-50, but we have the majority. But I think what you're going to see...
That's also something that's very important about November. That's why it's very important that we get out and vote. Like I said, I'm not really a fan of the Democrats, but at this point, yeah, that's where they're at right now in Texas already. Texas already made it to where if you don't get it done within 6 weeks, it is a civil punishment. Not, you can't go to jail for it. Now, this is what they're trying to make it happen. I know that's something that came out. I forget who actually said it this morning. That's what they're talking about here. But they are talking about an attempt at an all-out total ban nationwide to try to supersede our state laws. Obviously, I think that's a very slim chance that they could do that. But that's what they're thinking they can do if they were to win the next election for president. If they get Trump back in there. And if they maybe replace some of these swing state senators that went blue last election, because at the end of the day, Biden is not adequate. He's not actually a good president. He just isn't Trump. And that's, I guess, what we needed as a country, but I don't know why that's who we chose as our nominee. We had our last chance at Bernie, and we decided not to do that. So now we have to wait until we get another miracle star of a human being that we got there. And exactly, when it became that point of Biden versus Trump, I mean, see, I was in Texas. It's automatically red. There's nothing you can do about that. I voted Green Party just because... I would love if the Democrat Party would fight a little bit harder for my vote, because I am a leftist. If you have to get down to it, of what of the two major political parties do I closer align with? Obviously, it's the Democrats, but that does not mean we align almost at all. It's just, at least Democrats don't want to kill all trans people, reverse gay marriage, and remove abortion protections.
Is a discussion of this in real terms like we've never seen before. Back alley abortions, people having to take buses to other states, people not being able, as you said, to make their own economic decisions right as they're coming out of this pandemic. where there is so much uncertainty right now and people are just trying to get their grounding. And then we're literally stripping the women of this country of their rights. If that happens, I think you're going to see repercussions like never before. They have basically stacked the court with these judges through various procedural games that they play.
Oh, I know. That is the problem. Is it's like, why should I get out and do this? But I mean, I guess that's what we kind of saw this last time. That was when Trump was originally elected, going against Hillary Clinton. I wasn't compelled to vote. I didn't think either of them were great, and I hadn't ever voted before, so I wasn't trying to make my first going out and voting for president to be someone that I like ultimately just be like, she doesn't absolutely hate gay people, at least, but like that sometimes that's not enough for me to support you, just for you to be like, hey, it's okay for you to be gay and alive. And ah, shit. Exactly. I think that was like when Trump actually, I thought Trump had no chance of winning, so when he won, that's when I took it more serious the next time, that it's like, I mean, I drove so many people to go vote that year.
Played in the Senate, and now is the moment. And the only way this gets decided, if this opinion gets issued as is, it's going to be state by state fights about this, with the automatic triggers going in place in many, and then is going to be a decision for Congress. And it makes the election for the House and the Senate more important than any we've seen in our lifetime when it comes to the protection of women's rights.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, member of the Judiciary Committee representing the great.
Fuck. Oh, we lost our epic music. But so now you guys understand fully when I'm saying, like, actually, like, fuck Republicans. I don't like to be, I don't try to start fights. I don't think that this is something that we should be divided over, but I think that this leak, which is unprecedented, I don't know if I've already mentioned that, this is not something that happens. This was a very deliberate effort by someone to leak this so that we could be outraged, so that we could stop this from happening. We only have one chance for probably a while. And unless we stop this in its tracks right now, this is probably our future. And like the video said, that could be a very different future for our daughters and for our granddaughters. It could be a very different future for the women of our audience, or people assigned female at birth. So I'm assuming this is something that's going to lead to people in the streets at some point. I hope that it leads to us being able to be peaceful. But as you saw before, and the BLM protests especially, that people who wanted to be peaceful and wanted to have peaceful protests and were just asking for real change were faced with violence. They didn't ask for violence. They didn't want violence. They were given violence and they had to respond. And that's something that the American people are very good about, for better or for worse, because both sides exist and both sides can be like that. And that's where we're looking at right now, is that both sides think there's going to need violence. And ultimately, one day, something's going to come to an end. So, I mean, either we're like already in the apocalypse and we're just enjoying the end of the world here, We're just leading up to that, which could just be a fun old time. Maybe we just get hit by a comet and then we don't have to worry about this anymore. But it does look like, whether we want it or not, civil war is probably happening at some point. And I don't know if anyone is actually if anyone else watches, but that was something that Vosh was saying in a video he posted on this topic. Was that typically the argument of, to avoid all the crazy shit, if you're in a red state, you might have to leave and go to a blue state, and how that's classist and privileged to say. But as we get into this point, we might actually be having to look at that happening for people. Because what's the next thing that they target after Roe v. Wade? I mean, there is some extent to where you'd think there would be respect for laws that have existed so long in our country, and for things that have been a staple of American freedoms and American rights for so many years. Shit. That would be depressing as hell. They're gonna come and they're gonna try to federally take this shit away. I like being someplace where it's legal. Yeah, no, that's what I was saying is there's gonna be, I'm assuming, if this goes through and they're able to pull this off, the next one would be to try to reverse gay marriage. And luckily, I think that it would be butt bot. Not the best time to cut in a serious discussion like this, but maybe we need just a little bit. And yeah, you're right. Not just marriage. I mean, in general, like you've already seen when in Florida with the "Don't Say Gay" bill. I mean, obviously, this is something that they're preparing legislation for, and they're testing to see how their base is reacting to it on a ballot. You saw in Texas do the abortion thing, and as a whole, it seems like most people are pretty fine with that. So, don't mean to be over dramatic or cause anyone anxiety if I did. Obviously, this is just me reacting to something that I'm passionate in general about human rights. I say that I'm into politics. I'm actually way more passionate about human rights than I am about politics. But they end up being so hand in hand sometimes that you have to know how it all works to even make it happen. So, before we go on, because I'm about to play a game, I do feel like I just need to also give love and appreciation to all you guys. I know sometimes it's stressful to talk about these things, but I want to make sure that we don't brush over these things that are really important. I want to make sure that this channel is a lot more about having fun and playing games and watching funny videos and stuff. But at the same time, I do want to make sure that when something important happens, we do talk about it, we do address it, and we do whatever we can to be mindful of that and spread that. Because we do know how important this next midterm election is going to be. And we do know how important it is to be heard by all of our representatives and to especially our unelected officials that really shouldn't even be in power at this point. It's, as we already said, it's an incredibly dumb system. But I personally will be making sure to be writing, at least for the time being. We might have to prepare for the worst, but for right now, we can prepare to hopefully stop this before it gets bad.